Welcome back to another episode of Off Hours with the Bourbon Lens. This week, I'm excited to head out west to Wyoming, where, if you don't know, some of the best wheated whiskey, wheated bourbon is being made in Kirby, Wyoming. And we have David DeFazio here joining us as a recurring guest, but also someone that I just got to spend a lot of time with watching Ozark, Jason Bateman's lookalike here on Off Hours with Bourbon Lens. So, David, how are you?
I'm great. I'll take that as a compliment.
Oh, it's awesome. Like every time I see Jason Bateman, whether it's in dodgeball, as a complete goof, to like him being serious in Ozark, I always text Bob, our mutual friend, and I'm like, Bob, I just hung out with David for a couple hours watching Ozark. And he's like, I'm sure he gets that all the time. Or if I don't know, I may be the only person that like really hammers that one home.
I get it more often than not. So
it's not a bad thing. The guy hasn't aged. Like that's the other good thing. So it means you're aging like fine wine.
Thank you. And his podcast is really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy that. He's a funny guy.
Oh, he's hilarious. And it's just so funny when like funny people make serious things, right? Like him, like I always like thought of this jokester, type of person. And then he's like in Ozark, Arrested Development, all of that stuff was hilarious to me. Same thing was like Steve Carell. Steve Carell's, 40-Year-Old Virgin, all that stuff. And then he makes the news show on Apple Plus, and that's super serious. Or that movie where he's the wrestling coach. And I'm like, it's kind of weird seeing them step out of that like comedic role. But I know honestly, they're probably hilarious all together all the time. So, hopefully you're funny. Are you funny? Does your daughter think you're funny?
I like to think my daughter thinks I'm funny. I like to think that I've got a good sense of humor, but that's for you to tell me. So.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just getting to know you some more. This is all this is about. And we're excited to have you back. We're, again, for everyone who's listened to a few of these episodes, we've had 5. This is episode 6. We're just talking to people that are in the distilling industry that have lives, like, right? We think that whiskey is the life because it is a 24/7 job, but there is a variety of other things that happen in there. And excited to talk to you because you're in a completely different, geographical landscape than a lot of the people that we talk to, and a destination place even for most outdoors people. So what's that like, living in, Wyoming 24/7 and getting the tourist season, but also, you dredge the cold winters there too.
It was a lifestyle choice that I made 30 years ago. I wanted to live out west. I wanted to live in the mountains. I wanted to live close to rivers. I wanted to live in the mountains. I wanted to ski. I wanted to fish, hunt, just get out after it with all the outdoor pursuits, that are so easily accessible here in this region. And I've tried a little bit of everything. I was a whitewater rafting guide in the beginning, after college and before and during law school, a little bit after. And then I'm an attorney as well. So, I've practiced law for a long time. But, what is it? You can either live to work or work to live, and I work to live. And my life is the most important thing. And I thoroughly enjoy, like, as soon as tomorrow morning, I'm getting up early and I'm hiking up Snow King. I'm training for an uphill quote race. I'm no elite athlete by any means, but it's one of those things that keeps you moving. Mm-hmm. And so, those are the types of things that I look forward to that. And I've got as soon as I'm done with that, I'm picking up 2 of my buddies and we're going to go to an overnight fishing trip in the South Fork of the Snake River over in Idaho and float into this outfitter's camp who's going to cook us a great meal. And the fishing should be really good. We get the same dates every year, and it just seems to be hitting it perfect with this certain hatch that comes up the river. And so, it was a conscious choice I made, and I'm glad I made it.
Yeah. I think those are some of the crazy things. Like, for us here local, like we get a lot of cool things, rivers and lakes, and bourbon obviously is like in our backyard and we can do all that. But like, people flock out west every year, whether it's Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, right? They're going droves. And so what's that like being a local in those places and seeing people just kind of like flock to, your all's location and kind of overwhelm it for a few months? Do you still feel like you have time to enjoy the peaceful things in life? Like go and fly fish and yell at Herb to mend?
Yeah. Yes, of course. You got to understand is tourists allow us to have a living out here. So you can't trash them too much because they're the ones who are buying our whiskey. They're the ones who are going to the restaurants. They're the ones who are taking the tours and hiring fishing guides and hunting guides and all that stuff. So you got to understand that. I mean, that's part of it. What wears on you is just there's so many of them, and especially during COVID.
Yeah,
we had record visitation numbers coming through Jackson, going to Grand Teton, going to Yellowstone, and it just puts a huge stress on everybody. You know, my friends in the service industry were just shot halfway through the summer. You know, they were ready to quit. You know, and so it puts a big stress. It did put a big stress. This summer, tourism seems to be down like 25%, and which means it's just getting back to kind of normal.
Yeah.
And I welcome that, you know, from a personal perspective, from a selfish perspective. That's fewer people buying whiskey, but you know, it is what it is. We can't control that. I think high gas prices and all that are what's driving this down. But, you know, it's fun because you meet people from all around the United States and pre-COVID all around the world. You know, you meet people from Europe one day, you meet people from Japan the next, you meet people, you know, they're coming in from everywhere because Yellowstone's such a massive draw. And so our town has grown tremendously in the 30 years that I've been here, but it's still an awesome place.
Yeah.
And on the busiest day of the year, July 4th, you can still find plenty of places to get away and you will not see another human being. You just have to try a little bit harder and you'll get there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty exciting though. Like even in these destination places that people go and they tour, like locals can still find their spots to enjoy, you know, their daily lives. And then that's big, right? To be able to get away from those things. And so one of the things that you're really, I think, well known for on this podcast, we've heard it from Bob, has talked about this a lot of times. And that's Bob at Novios Bistro for everyone listening, you know, talking about fly fishing. And the barrel pick they did with Damn It Herb Mind is hysterical, but it's a phenomenal pour of whiskey. You know, how did you get into fly fishing and that from what I hear, you know, to be pretty good at it?
My grandfather taught me when I was 4 or 5 years old. He put a fly rod in my hand, and he was more of a conventional tackle fisherman, but he had gotten into it enough and he wanted to at least introduce me to it. And at that age, it's not nearly as fun as, you know, throwing a live worm or throwing a spinner or whatever, but at least it was enough to get my attention.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really start fly fishing. Like it didn't really catch on in my head as a passion thing until I was in my later teens. And I went to St. Lawrence University in upstate New York. And so I really started fly fishing a lot more then, fishing a lot of the smaller creeks around there. And then when I moved here, 100%, you know, I just immersed myself in it. A number of my friends were guides, you know, Orvis guides, and there are a number of other shops around here, West Bank and whatnot. And they were guiding for them, and they were teaching me, you know, on their days off, they just wanted to get more and more of it. They wanted to learn as much as they could. And they brought me along, and I learned how to row a drift boat correctly. And I learned how to, you know, do a bunch of things, you know, how to cast a fly correctly, but knots, you know, learning all the knots you need and to be able to tie a certain knot in 8 seconds. And, you know, all of that comes. And then just when you think you know a lot, you meet somebody else who teaches you twice as much. You know? And it's a constant lesson. And this weekend, I'm going to learn something. You know, I'm going to learn something from a number of people. And that's the fun part about the sport is, you know, there's always another layer.
Yeah. I mean, it looks very tranquil, right? Like especially everything that I've seen, like the movies portray it or the TV shows portray as fly fishing is a place you get out. You still have some distance between you. There could be a little conversing. There's not a ton, but you're kind of out there and you're doing your own thing. And then you come together, you know, at the back end of the day to have your conversation, talk about what all you did. So do you find it as more of a tranquil thing or bonding, you know, experience, even though you're kind of a distance from each other when you're actually fishing?
Well, there's two different styles. You know, one is wade fishing, which is what you're referencing. And if I do go out with somebody, you kind of go your two different ways. Or one guy takes one bank and the other guy takes the other. And, you know, you might yell at each other every now and then to be like, you know, what are they biting on? You know, how big was that one or whatever. That's more of a quiet time, really focus on the water. Everything else goes away. and you try to figure out what's happening. And there's so many different variables when it comes to fly fishing, from water temperature, which is a huge thing. These rivers warm up over the course of the day, and you catch it at the right zone, and bugs become active, fish become active, etc. From that to which bugs are they? What size are they? What size leader should you be using? How far away? I mean, there's any number of different things that you need to be considering. And when you're wade fishing, I think that's when you really can focus a lot on that, and you teach yourself, you learn, right? But when you're fishing from a boat, so there are these drift boats, and they're person boats. The oarsman sits in the middle of the boat, or the guide, and then you have a fisherman in the front, fisherman in the back, and you're fishing either towards the banks or towards structure in the middle of the river and whatnot. And that's much more camaraderie. Yeah. You have a cooler in the boat. You might be drinking beers. You might be sipping off of a little flask, which I have poured some of my favorite bourbon of ours for our trip this weekend into a flask. And
there we go.
That's a lot more bonding and goofing off. And if the fishing's no good, then, it becomes a little bit more of a booze cruise. But it's always fun and relaxing. And if you could just throw your phone, into the dry bag and forget about it for the day, that's the best part.
Yeah. So what do you catch? Like, what type of fish are you all like looking after this weekend or most regularly?
Sure. Out here, it's trout. The one trout species that's Wyoming's known for in particular is the cutthroat trout. And there's 4 different types of them, like subspecies, but that's the primary species around here that you fish for. And then there's rainbows, which are everywhere, brown trout. And then when you get into the higher streams, you're going to get into brook trout, beautiful. They almost look painted. And then in the lakes around here, you have Lakers, which are, a lot of people catch those and smoke them or cook them and whatnot because they're not threatened or anything. There's plenty of them. Yeah. I release 99% of the fish that I catch just because I don't need to eat that many fish. But every now and then when I get a taste for it, I'll keep a good, 12-incher, a smaller fish. The bigger they get, they're not as good. And I don't know if I want to eat an entire one, big, like a 20-incher. So
yeah, get you a couple pound fish and you're like, I can't eat, a 5-pound fish like that.
Right. Exactly.
Your eyes would be bigger than your stomach at that point.
Yep, exactly.
So you got fishing. You talked about going out to the mountains. What's that like, from summer to winter? Like, and what do you like to do in the mountains? So you like to hike, obviously, but do you like to ski, snowboard? What's your kind of your poison when it comes to those things?
When it comes to so I love to ski in the winter.
Yeah.
I always get a season pass to Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, which in my opinion is the best skiing in the country as far as lift access skiing. When it comes to just walking into the mountains, though, I personally always need a goal. Yeah. Like, I don't want to just go for a hike. I want to go for a hike that gets me to a mountain lake that I can fish. Yeah. Or I want to hike to, I don't do a ton of rock climbing, and I haven't in a long time. My shoulders have been messed up. But when I was doing that, you hike to a certain pitch and then you climb it and come back down, or you hike to a summit. And so that's how I was always, I need a goal, something to achieve. And in the wintertime, same thing with skis on my back. It's nice to go, skin or hike up to a certain spot or to a certain line so you can get something that no one else has touched.
Yeah.
So, and it's fun in the winter. Like when you climb a mountain in the summer, you got to walk down. When you climb a mountain in the winter, you don't have to walk down. You get to ski it, and you're going to be 10 times as fast and have 10 times as much fun going down. So it's fun in the winter.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I've never skied. I've always approached the big man fall hard adage when it comes to skiing. Now, I know there are bigger people that do ski. I'm 6'5". Like I know I have my friends that are similar height that do that. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And they're like, you were an athlete. You could pick it up. I'm like, I can. But at, over 30, things can start to break a little easier and ACLs can start to tear a little easier. And I just,
But you got to remember, my friend, that it's not Butler or Paoli Peak. It's much softer out here, and I fall plenty. It happens.
Yeah.
But when you've got a nice cushion of snow that you're falling into, it's a big difference than landing, dropping that hip on some ice and limping for the next week. So
the fact that you threw out Paoli Peaks just makes me chuckle a whole bunch because
it's the first place I ever skied.
And it's a shit show. It still is.
Oh, I'm sure. And it was way back when. I mean, I don't know if you remember, I lived in Louisville for a number of years, and my first skiing experience was at Paoli Peak. I believe it was night skiing. And I probably was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt and skied down into that valley and took the lift back out, and I fell, countless times. But big difference between that and skiing Jackson, where we're getting on a big year 500 inches of snow, and you could lawn dart anywhere, off trail, and you're not going to get hurt really.
Yeah,
it's a big difference.
Well, that means I just need to go do skiing where people like to ski, and start on the small mountains, ones, tiny ones.
A beginner run would be a good start.
Yes, on that. So we've talked a lot about just like what Wyoming has to offer and what you do, but you own a lot of the day-to-day operations, a lot of things with whiskey. So when you think about Wyoming whiskey and all of that, like, how do you find a time to break all that up? And what's your go-to thing to do outside of just being outdoors or fishing? Like, what's your next go-to thing, to break up your day from, just all the whiskey all the time?
I do a little bit of legal work.
Yeah.
And I have to say, when Edrington partnered with us, 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, that took a tremendous pressure off of me personally, because at that point, before the Edrington partnership, I was working and I was responsible for almost everything. Yeah. And some of the things I was very good at, some of the things I was not good at all. And, the one thing that we couldn't achieve was national distribution. And once we step over the Wyoming boundaries and into Colorado and other places, distribution is difficult. You don't have the home field advantage anymore. And when Edrington stepped in, they had a tremendous amount of sway when it comes to all the different distributors. I mean, when you have the portfolio that they have, that opens doors. And when they're telling you, the distributor, they're not asking, they're telling, hey, Wyoming Whiskey's with us now, we need them to be prioritized. And it brings us from the 26th priority, up into the top third maybe. And that was a big day. And so all of the distribution was turned over to them outside of Wyoming. I still manage the Wyoming component of it. And that frees up a lot of time, and they're much more successful at it than I could ever have been, or any small distiller. I mean, anybody who's been at this industry for a while who doesn't have that type of partnership understands exactly what I'm talking about, right?
The grind.
So that freed up a bunch of time in and of itself, and they took on a lot of the legal work. They have a compliance department and all of that. So a number of those tasks shifted over to them. And it allowed me to do a little bit of legal work, which is one of those things that I've done for a long time, and I enjoy it. Yeah. And so it's nice to be able to help out here and there whenever I do have time, to do that type of work. And it's a break from Wyoming whiskey. Wyoming whiskey still is number one priority, and it takes up the majority of my time. But as far as stepping away from things, I don't mind walking around the town square of Jackson. My thing is, my break is I have to take a lunch every day. And I take it right around noon, and I will meet up with a buddy or not. And I'll go to a different place and just sit there and either read the local paper or talk to the bartender or talk to the whomever. And I just kind of flush my brain of everything. And it gives me an opportunity to, connect with somebody that isn't involved in the whiskey or legal community. And that's very refreshing. I'm a very social creature. And, during COVID, this has come up twice in the last 2 days, coincidentally. I was depressed for the beginning of COVID. I mean, I need that social interaction. I'm more of an extrovert. And it was difficult to not do that stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. I got a lot of fishing in. I was going out by myself and camping and, not seeing people. And that was great. But again, I needed that interaction. So I enjoy doing that. I really enjoy hiking to get to the top of Snow King, to get in shape like that. That's my jam when it comes to, fitness. Yeah. And my daughter, is really the king of it all. I mean, I'll be picking her up here in about an hour, and, I'm really enjoying, she's 4 now. She's funny. She challenges me. And you get to see the world through a set of eyes, that is so fresh and new and sharp to it all that it's really refreshing.
Yeah, kids are awesome. My son is winding close to 3, and he's going to be a huge child. He was next to a 4-year-old yesterday and was taller than the 4-year-old. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And he was like talking, like they were having like the same language. Like it wasn't like he was deficient to the 4-year-old. It was like kind of crazy. But just to see like their energy, and like when you're tired and they're happy and they're smiling, like you think coming home to a dog's nice. Coming home to a child, like if you've had a crappy day or whatever, like that's just completely different, right? Like it just
Totally
changes the way you see things. And kids are awesome, but they are a handful.
They are tiring and all of that, but you just have to remind yourself that it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like get your ass off the couch, get your ass out of the chair, go take her to the park, go do whatever. And it's always rewarding. So I love it. That would be, I enjoy that very much. And she's old enough now as to where I'm about to start teaching her how to fly fish, or at least fish.
Yeah.
And she loves everything. There's nothing that she said, I don't like doing that. So it's going to be a fun second half of the summer now.
Yeah. And so like, that's the fun thing. Like when they can start to like comprehend all the things that you all like to do and you can have those conversations and they can do things. Like my son loves to tackle me. Like that's his new thing. And so like, I'm like, oh, well then we're on a path to play football, and mom and grandmas are like, no, we're not. And I'm like, if he's interested in that, like who better to teach him than someone that may play at the collegiate level? So like, if you're an expert fly fisherman or pretty good at it, I don't know how do you classify expert or not. If you're affluent in fly fishing, why not teach them that? Like if I have a skill, like I want to impart that on my child. If they want to learn that skill, like I'm all for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I played soccer too through college, and it's funny. A bunch of guys and I went out and we played indoor, I don't know, a month and a half ago, and I haven't played in a long time. And we get out there, we're like, hey, we're just going slow, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to knock the ball around, whatever. The second we say go, everyone's going 100%. Two guys pull up with hamstring injuries, it's one thing or another. I do want her to introduce her to that, and that'll be a fun way to do it. But I think my competitive soccer days are over.
Yeah. So I went to take off yesterday in the park, and I was like, yeah, we don't need to be taking off. Like I got 4 or 5 steps. But after that, I did not stretch, and we could pull a hammy, and I could be down for weeks. You don't have the same things like when you have a training room in college and stuff where you can like go and get icing and like stem, like all that. Like that's a deductible cost now, and I don't really want to deal with that.
Exactly, it's a lot of money.
It is. So as we kind of wrap up today, because we've been all over the place and I love it, but I like to ask this question because you get to do it, I think, a little bit better than most. In this day where we're so connected as individuals, we're connected as family. Like, what's your one piece of advice that you would give to people about just taking a break and getting away and having those off-hour moments?
I kind of touched on it a little bit ago, but it's the phone.
Yeah.
It's throwing the phone in a bag and ignoring it. And I understand that it's a tool, and when used as a tool, it's great, to take a picture of a beautiful fish or take a picture of your daughter or whatever. But I'll be honest, I find myself getting sucked into social media sometimes in an unhealthy level. And I've really tried to say, no, just throw the phone on the couch. And, I don't need to answer every phone call, that comes in. When I was a kid, there was no cell phones, phone was attached to the wall with a curly Q cord. And if you weren't near it, you missed the call.
Yeah.
You don't need to be that connected, and I'm admitting that I suffer from this. And so, my advice to myself, to you, and to anybody is, you got to clear your mind sometimes. And to workaholics, which I'm very focused on work like everybody, but you got to clear your mind. And I think throwing that phone away for a period of time and just focusing and being present in what you're doing, if that's going for a walk, hike, ski, fish, daughter, whatever, I think it really improves the quality of life and the time that you're spending doing those things. So that's my best advice.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I'm 90 days sober on social media. So I've,
good for you.
Thank God for Scott, for doing all of our social media work. But it was a conscious decision me and my wife made. And it's weird, right? Like we have this podcast and we have this social media presence, and I'm like, it wasn't good. Like we were just going down these rabbit holes. And I think, for me, I love to work too. And so like having that plus work, right? Like it was just too much. And next thing you know, you're 6-7 hours on your phone a day and you're like, I don't need to be on my phone 7 hours a day. Like, why am I doing that? So I definitely agree. And I think more people, I think there's a movement towards that, but I think we have to continue to, give that piece of advice because like you, like my first phone when I was 14, and it was like, all you could do was make a phone call. And if you sent a text message, your mom was going to yell at you for like spending 50 cents a message.
Right.
That was bad. And like we had the extra extended cord. So like we could go to the room and like have the phone call if we needed to, but like that was 2 rooms and like someone could just unplug it. I definitely know how that goes. It makes me sound old, but really like that wasn't that long ago. Like kids today will never understand that, but like that's only 30 years, like 25 years ago. Like that's not far back when all this was happening. Well, David, thank you so much for joining this episode of Off Hours with Bourbon Lens. You can find out more about Wyoming Whiskey at Wyoming Whiskey on all their social channels. They've got a great couple things coming up. And I know this year is huge in December. If you just want to talk about what's happening in December of this year, I think it's just really big to kind of close out the show.
Sure. It's our 10th anniversary. We released our first bourbon on December 1st, 2012, and we're coming up on 10 years. So we have pulled together with the help of Steve Nally and Nancy Fraley, an absolutely spectacular 10-year-old bourbon that is one of the components of our Outrider. We have, bottom line is it's spectacular whiskey. And so Nancy has been working on this for the last probably 9 months with Steve. And we were able to extract a few barrels from it that we're going to turn into single barrels next year for, a different project. And, those are going to be bottles that you're going to want to get your hands on.
Yeah.
But this batch is just off the charts. Nancy was so happy to be involved in this and she took it very seriously. She put on her kilt for sampling the barrels. She really took it seriously, which means the world to me. I mean, she's been nothing but fantastic for us. And so she has batched this up and she's like, David, I can't say enough about it. So that's going to be released at the same time. We're going to be doing a 10th anniversary party, both in Kirby and here in Jackson. We're renting out the Cowboy Bar on the town square here in Jackson, which I could not think of a better place to celebrate. And we're going to be celebrating over in Kirby. We're going to be moving our gift shop, which has been in a small house that we kind of converted to a shop, into what was a bar and grill that left town a few years ago. And it's a huge upgrade. So it's going to be a great location for an event over there. So we're super excited about that as well. And, in the interim, we're doing our National Parks 2, which was released a little earlier this summer. And we will be releasing 1872, very limited, 140 or so bottles of some fantastic single barrel. Not a true single barrel. We blended in a few gallons of something else. It was per Nancy's suggestion.
Yeah. So
it's a big year for us. We just have a bunch of stuff that has come out, will be coming out. And I keep joking with everyone. I'm like, what the hell are we going to do next year? We're never going to be able to follow this.
Yeah.
But there's always great stuff that we're finding and we come up with really new and unique stuff. So, but it's a big year for us. We're who would have thought we would have made it this far? And who would have thought we were partnered with Edrington? And, it's fun. I feel very comfortable with where we're at now. I think we're really rolling.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And I wanted to make sure people knew about that because I knew that National Parks had just released, and I knew there were some other things in the coming months that were to come out. And I definitely, have our eyes. We've been, talking about that 10th year, anniversary since we met last year to do the first podcast. So I wanted everyone to know about that. Make sure you're going and checking out Wyoming Whiskey. If you love wheated bourbons, I can't say enough about it. Like, go and do it. Some of the best people have helped craft and create this from the ground up. And you heard some great names, Steve Nally, Nancy Fraley, and then the team there at Wyoming that is continuing on that legacy. They're doing a phenomenal job with what they have going on. Thank you again for Off Hours for being the sponsor of this episode and letting us talk about things that are outside of whiskey and bourbon. And as always, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bourbon Lens. And rate us, give us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast listening app. We would be greatly appreciative of that. And until next time, cheers.